A kind girl paid for a meal from a millionaire who pretended to be poor. A few days later, she was shocked to receive a notice from the bank that the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the pale glow of the streetlights. Fred Shelton pulled his coat tighter, the chill biting through the fabric as he wandered aimlessly, his steps echoing softly against the quiet buzz of the city. He didn't know how far he had walked, only that his office and the suffocating demands of the day felt distant now. He reached into his pocket out of habit, only to remember his phone and wallet were on his desk, abandoned in his rush to escape the endless calls and emails. Ahead, a dim neon sign flickered, Millie's Diner. The small building exuded warmth, the kind that drew weary souls toward its embrace. The windows glowed softly, framing a scene of checkered floors, faded red booths, and the gentle hum of conversations. Without a second thought, Fred pushed open the door, the bell above jingling in greeting. The diner smelled of coffee and grease, a comforting contrast to the sterile, over-perfumed restaurants he frequented with business partners. A waitress darted between tables, her movements quick but deliberate, like someone accustomed to juggling chaos with practiced ease. She caught his eye, slightly disheveled but cheerful, her dark hair tied back into a ponytail and her eyes sharp despite the weariness etched into her features. Fred hesitated near the counter, suddenly aware of his rumpled appearance and lack of resources. The waitress approached him with a welcoming smile, clutching a small notebook in one hand. "Take a seat wherever you like," she said, her voice warm but brisk, as though kindness had to be rationed between tasks. Fred slid into the booth furthest from the door, adjusting his tie out of habit. The waitress appeared moments later, a menu already in her hand. "Long day?" she asked, setting the menu on the table without waiting for him to pick it up. Fred gave a small, tired laugh. "You could say that." Her gaze lingered for a moment, as if she could see through the layers of exhaustion he wore like armor. "Coffee?" she offered. "Sure, thanks," he replied, grateful for the simplicity of the exchange. She disappeared behind the counter, leaving him to glance around the diner. The walls were adorned with faded photographs and chalkboard specials written in a cheerful scrawl. It wasn't flashy, but it felt real in a way that reminded Fred of simpler times he couldn't quite recall. The coffee arrived steaming in a chipped ceramic mug. "Anything else to go with that?" she asked, flipping open her notebook. Fred reached for his back pocket, freezing halfway through the motion. The realization struck him like a slap. No wallet, no phone. His mind scrambled for a solution as he cleared his throat, stalling. "Actually, there's a bit of a problem," he began, his voice low. "I just realized I left my wallet at the office." Her pen hovered above the page, and for a moment, Fred braced himself for a curt dismissal or polite but firm refusal. Instead, she tilted her head, her expression softening. "So, no turkey club, huh? I'm sorry. I'll figure something out. Maybe..." He gestured vaguely toward the door, feeling the humiliation creep into his tone. The waitress leaned against the edge of the booth, her notebook snapping shut. "Look, it's a sandwich. Not exactly gonna break the bank." She gave him a faint smile. "You look like you've had a rough day. Let me take care of this one." Fred blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected kindness. "You don't have to..." "I know I don't," she cut him off, already turning toward the counter. "But everyone needs a break now and then." Moments later, she returned with a plate of food, setting it in front of him with practiced efficiency. "Enjoy," she said simply, before moving on to another table, her ponytail swaying with every step. Fred ate slowly, the turkey club disappearing bite by bite as he watched her weave through the diner. She greeted every customer by name, remembered their usual orders, and even slipped an extra slice of pie to an elderly couple at the corner booth. She wasn't just efficient, She cared in a way that seemed woven into her very being. When he finished, he approached the counter, his empty coffee cup in hand. The waitress glanced up from the register, arching a brow. "That good, huh?" Fred chuckled. "Better than good." "Thank you." "Anna?" He gestured toward her name tag. "I owe you one." She waved him off. "Just come back when you've got your wallet, or don't. Whatever works." Fred lingered for a moment, unsure how to express the odd mix of gratitude and humility swirling inside him. "I might just do that," he said finally, offering a small smile before stepping into the night. As the bell jingled behind him, Fred felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a lightness, a sense of possibility. The cold air nipped at his face, but the warmth of the diner and the memory of Anna's quiet generosity stayed with him long after he disappeared into the city streets. Fred sat in his office, the familiar hum of the city muffled by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The papers on his desk were a chaotic sprawl of contracts and proposals, but his gaze drifted unfocused toward the skyline. The numbers and deadlines blurred into meaningless figures. His mind was elsewhere, back in the warmth of Millie's diner. Anna's face lingered in his thoughts, not for her looks, but for the way she had looked at him, unjudging, kind, and utterly genuine. It was the first time in years someone had done something for him without a hidden agenda. The way she shrugged it off, calling it just a sandwich, as though her small act of generosity didn't carry the weight it had for him, stirred something unfamiliar in his chest. Fred pondered. What would she do if she believed he was just a poor, struggling individual? Would her kindness stretch further? Would it crack? The idea intrigued him. Perhaps too much. Fred pushed his chair back with a sigh, the leather creaking in protest. His eyes skimmed over the mess of paperwork on his desk. Deals could wait. Numbers could wait. For the first time, he felt an urge to step out, to find something or someone real. Grabbing his coat, Fred walked out of the office, leaving behind a pile of cluttered contracts and the life that suddenly felt too suffocating. The bell above the diner door jingled again, cutting through the quiet hum of the slow afternoon. Fred hesitated for a moment on the threshold, his fingers brushing the edge of the door as he glanced around. The diner felt different in daylight, a stark contrast to his first visit, softer somehow, bathed in the pale gold of early afternoon sun filtering through the windows. A few regulars lingered in booths, their quiet conversations blending with the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Anna stood behind the counter, stacking a row of freshly washed mugs. Her ponytail bobbed slightly as she moved, the same sharp efficiency guiding her actions. She looked up as Fred entered, her eyes narrowing briefly before recognition dawned. "Back so soon?" she asked, her tone teasing, but not unkind. Fred managed a sheepish smile as he slid into the same booth he'd occupied last night. "Couldn't stay away," he said, half joking. "Though, I'll admit, I'm still working on the wallet situation." Anna raised an eyebrow, one hand resting on her hip as she approached the table. "No wallet again, huh? Starting to sound like a pattern." Fred chuckled lightly, trying to ignore the flicker of guilt creeping into his chest. "I promise I'm not running a scam. Just bad luck, I guess." Anna studied him for a moment, her gaze flicking over his slightly wrinkled shirt and the faint shadow under his eyes. "You don't look like the usual kind of trouble that wanders in here," she said finally, "but you do look like you could use a sandwich." Before Fred could respond, she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. He leaned back against the worn leather of the booth, letting his eyes drift over the room. There was something grounding about the place. The muted colors, the smell of coffee and grease, the easy rhythm of it all. It felt like stepping into a world where things moved slower, where life wasn't measured in deals closed or emails answered, Anna returned a few minutes later, balancing a plate and a glass of water with practiced ease. She set them down in front of him with a small flourish. "Turkey Club and water," she said. "On the house." Again. Fred hesitated, searching her face for any hint of annoyance or judgment, but found none. Just the same quiet warmth she carried in her voice and movements. "You're too kind," he said, almost cautiously. Anna shrugged, sliding the notebook from her apron pocket and flipping it open. "Kindness is cheaper than fixing a broken door," she replied, glancing over at the elderly man at the counter. "Besides, you don't seem like the type to take advantage." Fred laughed softly. "That's a relief. I was worried I might be giving off grifter vibes." Anna smiled faintly, tapping her pen against the edge of the notebook. "Not quite. More like a guy trying to figure things out." Fred tilted his head, taken aback by her words. "That obvious, huh?" "Not really," she said, her gaze steady. "But most people don't wander into diners without their wallets unless they've got something on their mind." He didn't answer immediately, letting her words hang between them as he picked up the sandwich. It was easier to focus on the food than the sudden weight of the conversation. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like Anna was giving him space to answer if he wanted to, without pressing. As he ate, he watched her move between tables, greeting each customer by name and memorizing their orders without needing to write them down. She carried herself with an air of effortless competence, but Fred noticed the moments when her shoulders slumped slightly or her smile faded when she thought no one was looking. It wasn't exhaustion exactly. It was something deeper, a quiet resilience that struck him in a way he couldn't quite explain. When Anna circled back to his table, he set the sandwich down and gestured toward her with a faint smile. "You've managed this place flawlessly." "Millie's has been my second home since I was a kid," she said, glancing around the diner with a faint, wistful smile. "I guess I've had a lot of practice." Fred wanted to ask more about her life, her family, the stories behind the worn photographs on the walls, but something about her expression held him back. Instead, he nodded, his smile softening. "Well, thanks for the sandwich. Again, I owe you. Big time." Anna waved him off, already reaching for the stack of plates left behind by another table. "Like I said, just come back when you've got that wallet. Or don't. Either way, it's just a sandwich." As Fred stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the sound of the diner door closing behind him felt heavier than it should. He lingered for a moment, staring down the street, but thinking only of the woman inside, the way she carried herself, the way she seemed to understand people, without asking too many questions. For the first time in a long while, Fred felt the faint stirrings of something unfamiliar. Not just curiosity or gratitude, but a sense of peace he hadn't realized he'd been searching for. And with that, he knew he would be back. Fred entered Millie's diner later that week, this time with his wallet tucked securely in his coat pocket. The familiar bell chimed above his head as he stepped inside, greeted by the warm hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh coffee. His eyes immediately found Anna behind the counter, her ponytail swaying as she laughed at something a regular had said. She spotted him and raised an eyebrow as he approached his usual booth. "Third time's the charm, huh?" she teased, sliding a menu onto the table. "Let me guess, still no wallet?" Fred grinned and held up the brown leather as evidence. "Not today. Indeed, my intention was to change the course of events." Anna crossed her arms, feigning curiosity. "Oh, and how's that?" "Let me pay this time," Fred said. "Actually, better yet, join me for a meal. On me." Her smile faltered just slightly before returning with a softer edge. You don't have to do that." "I know I don't," he replied, his voice steady but light. "But I'd like to." Anna hesitated, glancing towards the counter where another waitress had just finished serving a table. "All right," she said finally, "but only because I skipped lunch." Fred's grin widened as Anna grabbed an apronless chair from a nearby table and sat across from him. A few minutes later, their plates arrived, his usual turkey club and a hearty BLT for her. "All right," Anna began, biting into her sandwich. "What's your story? You've been here 3 times in 1 week. I can't be that good a waitress." Fred laughed. "Fair point. I guess I needed a change of scenery." "From what?" she asked, her gaze curious, but not prying. Fred paused, considering his answer. "From work, the people, the noise." Anna nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "I get that. Sometimes you just need a break, even if it's just a sandwich at a diner." They ate in companionable silence for a while, but Anna eventually broke it. "So, what kind of work are you in?" Fred hesitated, the truth hovering just out of reach. "Business," he said vaguely. "It's not as exciting as it sounds." Anna smirked. "You're avoiding the question." "Guilty," he admitted. "But I'm more interested in your story. You've been here since you were a kid." "Pretty much," she said, her smile dimming slightly. "My dad used to run this place. After he passed, I started working here full-time to help keep it afloat." Fred leaned forward, his sandwich forgotten. "That's a lot to take on." Anna shrugged. "It is what it is. My little brother's in college now, so at least I know the hard work's going somewhere." Fred nodded slowly, noting the pride in her voice. "What's he studying?" "Education. Wants to be a teacher," Anna said, her smile returning. "He's a smart kid. I'm just trying to make sure he has the chance to finish." "And you?" Fred asked gently. "What's your dream?" Anna blinked, seemingly taken aback by the question. "I used to paint," she said after a moment. "Still do sometimes when I can. If I ever had the time or money, I'd love to open a small art studio. Nothing fancy. Just a place where people could come and create." Fred smiled, his admiration for her growing with every word. "That sounds incredible. What's stopping you?" Anna laughed lightly, a sound tinged with resignation. "Dreams don't pay bills, Fred, and this place needs me." Her words hung between them, and Fred felt a pang of guilt twist in his chest. She had given him so much, her kindness, her time, and he had been pretending to be someone he wasn't, someone who needed her charity. The thought of her finding out the truth terrified him. "You deserve it, though," Fred said softly. "The studio. Your dream." Anna tilted her head, studying him. "Maybe someday," she said with a small smile. "But for now, this is enough." Fred didn't reply, but her words stayed with him long after they finished their meal. As they walked to the counter, Fred insisted on leaving a generous tip, which Anna tried to refuse. "It's too much," she said, pushing the bills back toward him. "Consider it payment for the last 2 meals, Fred countered, his tone light but firm. "And an investment in that art studio." Anna laughed, shaking her head. "You're persistent. I'll give you that." As Fred stepped out into the evening air, he realized the truth he had been avoiding. He wasn't just intrigued by Anna anymore. He was falling for her. But with that realization came fear. The fear that when she learned the truth about who he really was, the fragile connection they had built might shatter. And yet, as he walked away from the diner, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't ready to let her go. Not yet. The bell jingled as Fred entered Millie's diner late in the evening. The usual warmth of the space felt different now, quieter, more intimate. The rush of customers had tapered off, leaving only a few stragglers lingering over their meals. Anna was behind the counter, her sleeves rolled up as she wiped down the surface, her movements slow but precise. She looked up as he approached, her smile faint but welcoming. "You're becoming a regular, Fred," she said, tossing the rag into a bucket. "What's the excuse today?" "No excuses this time," Fred replied, settling into his usual booth. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." Anna arched an eyebrow, leaning on the counter. "You must really like turkey clubs." Fred chuckled, but didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched her as she poured coffee into a mug and walked over to his table. She placed it in front of him before sliding into the seat across from him. "You're avoiding the question again," Anna said, her tone light but probing. "You're good at that, you know." Fred stirred the coffee absently, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. "Perhaps I'm simply an enigmatic individual," Anna smirked. "Or maybe you just don't want to talk about yourself. What are you hiding, Fred?" The question hung in the air between them, more playful than accusatory, but Fred felt the weight of it. He forced a smile. "Nothing as interesting as you'd hope. Business mostly, meetings, numbers, the usual." Anna's expression didn't change, but he noticed the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "You're vague," she said simply. "I mean, you show up here out of nowhere, spend half your time dodging questions, and you're, I don't know, different." Fred leaned back, his hands wrapped around the mug. "Different how?" "Different from the usual people who wander in here," she said, searching for the right words. "You're polished, but you don't act like it." Fred's laugh was quiet, almost self-deprecating. "Maybe I'm just good at blending in." Anna didn't press further, but the curiosity lingered in her gaze. She stood up, the conversation seemingly dropped, and returned to her duties. Fred watched her move about the diner, tidying up and locking the cash register. He didn't want to leave things hanging like this, but what could he say? The truth felt impossible to share. When the last customer left, Anna grabbed her coat from behind the counter and walked over to his booth. "Shift's over," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You hanging around, or are you heading out too?" Fred stood, sliding his own coat on. "I'll walk you home." Anna hesitated, her surprise evident, but she nodded. "All right. Let's go." The streets were quiet, the air crisp with the first hints of fall. They walked side by side, their footsteps echoing faintly. Fred stuffed his hands into his pockets, glancing at Anna out of the corner of his eye. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said after a few moments. "I've been walking home alone for years." "Maybe I wanted the company," Fred replied, his voice softer than usual. Anna looked up at him, her expression unreadable, but she didn't argue. They walked in silence for a few blocks before Fred spoke again. "Do you ever feel like you're stuck?" he asked, his gaze fixed ahead. "Like, no matter what you do, it doesn't mean anything?" Anna slowed her pace, glancing at him. "You sound like someone who's done everything already." Fred gave a short laugh. "Something like that." "What's missing?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Fred hesitated. "Connection, maybe. Something real." Anna didn't respond immediately. When she finally did, her voice was, "You seem to possess all the answers." The answers. But I guess everyone's looking for something. They turned the corner onto Anna's street, her apartment building coming into view. Before they reached the entrance, a voice cut through the stillness. "Well, this is a surprise." Anna stopped abruptly, her expression tightening. A man stood leaning against the lamppost just outside the building, a sharp suit, slicked back hair, and an air of smug confidence that made Fred's stomach tighten. The man's gaze flicked to Fred, and his eyes narrowed. "Anna," the man said, pushing off the lamppost, his tone far too familiar. "You've got interesting taste these days." Fred felt Anna stiffen beside him. "Peter," she said, her tone clipped, "what are you doing here?" Peter's smirk widened. "Just passing through. Didn't expect to see you with someone new." His gaze lingered on Fred, his expression shifting into something more calculating. Fred held his ground, his pulse quickening, as Peter's eyes seemed to register something. Recognition. Suspicion. Either way, it felt like the ground beneath Fred had shifted. Anna stepped forward, cutting off whatever Peter might have been about to say. "It's late," she said, firmly. "Good night, Peter." Peter raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course. See you around, Anna. And you—" He glanced at Fred, his smile sharp. "I'll be seeing you too." Fred watched as Peter strolled off into the night, a knot tightening in his chest. Whatever had just happened, it didn't feel finished, not by a long shot. The next evening, Fred found himself standing outside Anna's apartment again, the soft glow of streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. He'd walked her home after another quiet night at Millie's, their conversation light, but tinged with an unspoken tension. Fred had hoped the air would clear, that whatever unease lingered after their last encounter with Peter would fade. It didn't. As they approached her building, the same familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Peter. His smirk was already in place, a sharp contrast to the unease spreading across Anna's face. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Peter drawled, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. "2 nights in a row. Must be serious." Anna stepped forward, her shoulders squared. "What do you want, Peter?" Peter ignored her, his gaze locking on Fred. He studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing in recognition. Then, slowly, his smirk widened. "Wait a second. I know you." Fred tensed as the words penetrated the cool night air like a blade. "I don't think we've met." "Oh, we have," Peter said, his tone dripping with mock pleasantness. "Fred Matthews, right? CEO of Horizon Tech? Yeah, you're kind of a big deal. Hard to forget someone who's been on the cover of Forbes." Anna blinked, her head snapping toward Fred. What is he talking about? Fred opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, each second stretching painfully. Peter, sensing the growing tension, leaned against the lamppost with a satisfied grin. "What's the matter, Fred? Cat got your tongue?" He turned to Anna, feigning concern. "Oh, you didn't know? Your charming dinner companion here isn't just some regular guy. He's one of the richest men in New York. Didn't think to mention that, Fred?" "Anna," Fred began, his voice low and careful. "Let me explain." "Explain?" Anna's voice was sharp, her eyes blazing. "You've been lying to me this whole time, pretending to be, what? Broke? Normal?" "It wasn't like that," Fred said, his words rushing out. "I didn't want my life, my money, to define how you saw me. I wanted something real." Anna's laughter was bitter, cutting through the quiet. "So you used me? Tested me? To see if I was what? Good enough? Kind enough for someone like you?" Fred shook his head, stepping closer, but she backed away. "No, Anna, that's not what this was. Save it." Her voice cracked, the betrayal clear in her tone. "You let me think you were struggling, that you needed help. I gave you my time, my trust, and you made it all a lie." Peter watched the exchange with barely concealed glee. "Classic," he muttered. "Rich guy slumming it for kicks." "Stay out of this," Fred snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. But the damage was done. Anna's expression hardened, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I don't know what I expected," she said quietly, her words laced with hurt. But it wasn't this. Without a backward glance, she spun around and headed towards her building. Fred stepped after her, his heart hammering in his chest. "Anna, wait." The door slammed behind her, the finality of it echoing in the still night. Peter clapped slowly, his smirk infuriating. "Well done, Fred. Really nailed the whole humble millionaire routine. Bravo." Fred rounded on him, his fists clenched. "What's your problem?" "My problem?" Peter's tone sharpened. "My problem is that you're playing games with someone who deserves better. Anna's a good person, and you—" He gestured at Fred with disdain. "You're just another rich guy, treating people like pawns." Fred stared at him, his anger battling the guilt swirling in his chest. "You don't know anything about me." "Oh, I know enough," Peter retorted, "and so does Anna now." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Fred standing alone. As Fred stood motionless, the rain started to fall, softly at first, and then heavier, soaking through his coat. He replayed the conversation in his mind, each of Anna's words a dagger. She had been right. He had lied to her, even if his intentions had been good. And now, the fragile connection they'd built was shattered. Fred finally moved, his steps slow and heavy as he walked back down the street. The rain blurred the city lights into hazy streaks, matching the turmoil inside him. He had thought hiding the truth would protect what they had, but now it had destroyed it, and he had no idea how to fix it. Anna sat on the edge of her bed, the faint hum of the city outside her window, a distant backdrop to her swirling thoughts. The light from her bedside lamp cast long shadows on the walls, but her mind was far from the room. She replayed the night's events in her head, Fred's words tumbling over each other, leaving her with a bitter taste. "I wanted something real." "Real," she muttered under her breath, scoffing at the thought. Every moment she had shared with him felt tainted now, a lie hidden behind his carefully constructed facade. Her chest tightened as she thought of his smile, his laugh, things she had trusted, things she had started to care for. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She glanced at the screen, her stomach sinking when Peter's name lit up. With a deep breath, she declined the call, tossing the phone aside. She wasn't in the mood for his smug commentary or whatever manipulative scheme he had planned, but Peter was persistent. The next day as she walked into Millie's for her shift, he was already there, leaning casually against the counter. Anna's steps faltered, her patience fraying. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp. Peter straightened, flashing her a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Just wanted to check on you. Last night looked rough." "I'm fine," Anna said, brushing past him. She tossed her bag under the counter, hoping he would take the hint. "Are you?" he pressed, his tone softening in a way that felt calculated. "Anna, you deserve better than what Fred pulled. He played you, took advantage of your kindness." She turned to face him, her expression steely. "And what are you doing right now, Peter? You think I don't see through this? Whatever this is." Peter raised his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just looking out for you." "Don't," Anna snapped. "I don't need you to look out for me, and I certainly don't need whatever agenda you're pushing. Just leave." The finality in her tone seemed to stun him, if only briefly, but Peter recovered quickly, his smirk returning. "All right, Anna. Have it your way." He left without another word, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation wasn't over. Her instincts proved right that evening when her phone buzzed with an alert. A co-worker sent her a link to a blog post, the headline jumping out like a slap. "Tech mogul's newest game, slumming it with the help." Her blood ran cold as she clicked the link. The post was vicious, painting Fred as a manipulative billionaire toying with her out of boredom and labeling her a naive, opportunistic gold digger who had fallen for his act. The writer boldly speculated about her motives, even incorporating Millie's diner into the narrative. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the comments, each one worse than the last. Strangers calling her names, mocking her dreams, dissecting her life as if it were some twisted reality show. And at the heart of it all was Peter's name, the author of the piece. Anna sank into the nearest chair, her heart pounding. Anger, shame, and despair warred within her as she tried to process the damage. Fred's betrayal had been personal, but this was public humiliation. Across town, Fred stared at the same blog post on his tablet, his jaw clenched. He had been in the middle of a meeting when the notification came through, and now the glossy veneer of his office felt suffocating. The post was calculated, designed to cut deep, and it had succeeded. Not just in tarnishing his name, but in dragging Anna into the mess. As he read the cruel comments, his guilt grew, each one serving as a stark reminder of how his actions had gone out of control. He slammed the tablet onto his desk, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Anna. About the way he had inadvertently brought chaos into her life. Anna sat in her apartment that night, staring at the blank canvas she had planned to paint on. The art supplies she'd carefully saved felt meaningless now, overshadowed by the cruel words echoing in her mind. Her dreams, her pride, her trust, it all felt tainted. Meanwhile, Fred paced his penthouse, the city lights casting harsh reflections against the glass walls. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but he also knew he couldn't stand by and let this define Anna's life, or their story. As the blog post continued to spread, both Fred and Anna were thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. For Anna, it was a test of resilience. For Fred, it served as a moment of awakening. And for both, it was a moment that would force them to confront the truth about who they were and what they meant to each other. The storm was just beginning. Anna's life experienced a ripple effect from the blog post. Millie's diner, once a haven of warmth and familiarity, now felt like a stage under a harsh spotlight. Regular customers stopped coming, their polite smiles replaced by furtive glances and whispers. Strangers wandered in, not for the food, but to gawk at the gold digger from the infamous article. Every time the bell above the door jingled, Anna braced herself for another blow. She worked tirelessly, her head held high, refusing to crumble under the weight of humiliation. But when she closed the diner each night, the silence of her small apartment pressed in around her, amplifying her doubts and insecurities. She could barely look at her canvases without hearing the mocking words of faceless strangers echoing in her mind. Across town, Fred stood in the quiet expanse of his penthouse, staring out at the glittering city below. The weight of guilt sat heavy on his chest. He had seen the hurt in Anna's eyes, read the vitriol in the comments, and knew he couldn't leave things as they were. Fred didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone, dialing his financial advisor. "I need the debt records of a man named Foster. Passed away a few years ago. His daughter is Anna Foster." "Pay everything off," Fred instructed, his voice firm. Quietly. The next call was to the foundation he had supported for years. "Establish a scholarship for Anna Foster younger brother. Full tuition coverage. Make it a merit-based scholarship in his name. No mention of me." Over the next few days, Fred's plans unfolded. He coordinated the quiet delivery of high-quality art supplies to Anna's apartment, brushes, canvases, and paints of every shade and hue. Among the items was a handwritten note, its corners slightly smudged from his hesitant grip as he wrote, "Anna, I understand that words alone cannot undo the harm I've inflicted, but I trust that this gesture will suffice. Your art deserves to be seen, Your dreams deserve to be realized, and you deserve better than the chaos I brought into your life. I'm sorry for everything, and I admire your strength more than you'll ever know." Anna came home from the diner one evening to find the box waiting at her door. She opened it cautiously, her breath catching as she uncovered the contents. The brushes were soft to the touch, the canvases pristine and inviting. The note, however, was what truly stopped her. Her fingers traced the ink as she read Fred's words. She reread them, her emotions shifting between anger, confusion, and an ache she couldn't quite name. She set the note aside and stared at the supplies, the weight of her conflicted feelings pressing down on her. The next day, her brother called, his voice trembling with excitement. "Anna, I got a scholarship, full tuition. It's incredible. I don't know how this happened." Anna listened, her heart swelling with pride for her brother, but also with suspicion. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. Later that week, a letter arrived from the bank, confirming that her father's debts had been paid in full. Anna's hands shook as she read it. She pieced together the evidence, Fred's resources, his guilt, and now these quiet, significant gestures. It had to be him. Her anger remained, but something else began to stir. An appreciation for his efforts, for the way he seemed determined to support her, even from a distance. He wasn't seeking credit, wasn't demanding forgiveness. He was simply trying to make things right. Anna picked up the note again, reading Fred's words one more time. She folded it carefully and placed it in her drawer. For the first time since the scandal broke, she sat down at her easel, dipping a new brush into vibrant paint. As she began to work, the noise in her mind quieted, replaced by the steady rhythm of creation. Fred, pacing his penthouse that evening, didn't know if Anna would ever forgive him. But for now, it was enough to know he had given her a small piece of what she deserved. Anna stared at the half-finished painting, the colors bold and alive. She glanced at Fred's note one last time, realizing his gestures weren't about redemption. They were about her. Something inside her softened, even as the scars of betrayal remained. Fred sat in the sprawling conference room of Horizon Tech, the tension palpable as the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Across the long table, the head of public relations cleared his throat. "Fred," he began, his voice cautious, "this key situation with the post. It's causing ripples. Investors are concerned about the implications for the company's image." Fred leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, but his jaw tightening. "What implications are we talking about?" Another board member spoke up, her voice sharper. "The article paints you as reckless and manipulative. If this narrative sticks, it could affect our partnerships. We need assurance that you're handling it." "I am," Fred said firmly. "And let me make this clear. The accusations in that article are baseless. I plan to publicly confront these accusations and rectify the situation." The room fell silent, but Fred could feel the lingering doubt in the air. He dismissed the doubt, understanding that actions would carry more weight than mere assurances. Later that evening, Fred sat in his office, his focus locked on the open file on his desk. His private investigator had been thorough, tracing the origins of the blog post back to Peter. The smug face from that fateful night outside Anna's apartment stared back at Fred from the attached photo. "Peter," Fred muttered under his breath, his frustration simmering into determination. He knew the man had orchestrated this, fueled by his bitterness toward Anna and the need to disrupt Fred's life. Fred closed the file with a sharp snap. If Peter wanted a fight, he would get one. It was time to step into the ring. Against Peter, against the media, and against anyone who thought they could define Anna or him with lies. Fred stood behind the podium, his palms gripping the edges tightly as the cameras clicked incessantly. The room was packed, journalists from every major outlet eager to capture the latest chapter in the scandal that had consumed both his and Anna's lives. The air buzzed with anticipation, a sea of curious and skeptical faces staring back at him. He adjusted the microphone, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something raw, vulnerable. He glanced down at the notes he had prepared, but they felt hollow now, inadequate to convey what he needed to say. Taking a deep breath, he set them aside and looked directly into the audience. "I won't deny the facts that have come to light over the past weeks," Fred began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Yes, I made mistakes. I lied about who I was, and I deceived someone who didn't deserve it. Anna Foster." The murmurs in the crowd rose slightly, and Fred waited for them to die down before continuing. "What I did was wrong. It was driven by fear. Fear that my success, my money, would overshadow any chance of forming a real connection. Anna, she is the most genuine person I have ever met, and I didn't want her to see me through the lens of my wealth. So, I pretended to be someone I'm not." He paused, the weight of his admission pressing down on him. "But what I didn't realize was that by hiding the truth, I was undermining the very connection I was trying to build. I hurt her, and for that, I am deeply sorry." Fred's voice grew firmer as he looked directly into the cameras. His words meant not just for the reporters, but for Anna, wherever she might be watching. Anna Foster is one of the strongest, most selfless people I have ever known. She works tirelessly to support her family, sacrificing her own dreams to ensure her brother can pursue his. She's endured hardships I can't even imagine, all while maintaining her kindness and integrity. He leaned forward slightly, his hands gripping the podium tighter. The accusations made against her are not just false, they're cruel. Anna is not a gold digger. She didn't know who I was, and she didn't care. All she saw was someone who needed help, and she didn't hesitate to offer it, even when she had so little to give. Fred's voice softened, the vulnerability in his tone palpable. "I may have failed her in many ways, but I will not fail her now. Anna deserves better than the lies and judgment that have been thrown her way. She deserves respect, recognition, and above all, an apology from me and from everyone who has doubted her." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Fred's words hanging heavily in the air. Then the murmurs began again, softer this time, as the reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Fred stepped back from the podium, his heart pounding as he walked off the stage. He had expressed everything he could, exposing himself to the world. Now, all he could do was hope it was enough to shift the narrative. Across town, Anna sat on her couch, the remote clutched tightly in her hand as she watched the press conference unfold on her television. Her heart twisted at Fred's words, the sincerity in his voice, cutting through the wall she'd built around herself. She saw the vulnerability in his expression, the way he owned up to his mistakes without excuses or justifications. When he spoke about her strength, her sacrifices, she felt something stir within her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a flicker of understanding, a recognition of the courage it took for him to stand up and say those things, not just to her, but to the world. The screen cut to a panel of commentators, their tones surprisingly sympathetic as they dissected Fred's speech. Words like genuine, remorseful, and honest floated through the discussion, and Anna could see the shift happening in real time. Every replay of Fred's words unraveled the cruel narrative Peter had spun. Anna turned off the television, her mind racing. She picked up the note Fred had sent her, reading it again in the quiet of her apartment. The anger and betrayal still lingered, but so did the memory of his actions. The way he had supported her family without asking for recognition. The way he had quietly tried to make things right. For the first time in weeks, Anna allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, Fred's intentions had been as genuine as he claimed. Anna folded the note carefully and set it aside. Her thoughts were still conflicted, but as she glanced at the unfinished painting on her easel, she felt the first spark of possibility. That maybe Fred's words and his actions were a step toward something real. That weekend, have an event. The community gallery was small but inviting, its white walls illuminated by warm overhead lights that bathed the space in a soft glow. Anna stood near the entrance, nervously fidgeting with the edge of her cardigan. Around her, guests wandered between easels and framed works, murmuring softly as they admired the art. Each piece felt like an extension of her, raw, vulnerable, and deeply personal. This was her first exhibition, a culmination of weeks spent pouring her soul onto canvas. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For so long, her art had been confined to the privacy of her apartment. Now it was out in the world, exposed to strangers and their judgments. Yet, seeing her paintings displayed here, in a space filled with warmth and curiosity, gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. As she moved through the room, greeting attendees and answering questions about her work, Anna caught a familiar silhouette near the back of the gallery. Fred. He stood slightly apart from the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on one of her larger pieces, a sunrise bursting over a still lake. His expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet intensity in his gaze that made her chest tighten. Anna's initial reaction was to ignore him. She wasn't sure she was ready to face him. Not here, not now. But as the moments stretched, she found herself walking toward him, her heartbeat quickening with each step. Fred noticed her approach and straightened, his posture wary but hopeful. "Anna," he said softly, his voice almost swallowed by the hum of conversation around them. "Fred," she replied, her tone cautious. She stopped a few feet away, her arms crossed loosely. "You're here." "I didn't want to miss this," he said, gesturing toward the painting in front of him. "Your work is incredible. It's powerful." Anna's lips pressed into a thin line as she studied him, searching for any trace of pretense. She found none, just the same sincerity she had seen during his press conference. "Why did you come, really?" Fred sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Because I needed to see this. To see you. And because I wanted you to know how much I admire what you've done. Not just here tonight, but everything. Your strength, your kindness. It's inspired me in ways I can't even explain." Anna felt the anger she had carried for so long begin to waver, replaced by a quiet ache. "You hurt me, Fred. You lied to me. You made me question everything about us." "I know," Fred said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I'll carry that regret for as long as you want me to. But I've been trying, Anna. I've been trying to make things right. Not to win you back, but because it's what you deserve." She looked away, her gaze landing on the painting beside them. A lone figure standing on a dock, staring out at an endless horizon. It mirrored how she felt, torn between staying in the safety of the shore and venturing into the unknown. "I saw the press conference," she said finally. "It meant something. Hearing you admit your mistakes, owning up to everything, it mattered." Fred's eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through his guarded expression. "Does that mean you're willing to give me a chance? To prove that this isn't just words?" Anna hesitated, her emotions tangling together. But as she glanced around the gallery, at the space she had created, at the people who had come to see her art, she realized something. Fred had helped make this possible. His actions, though quiet and understated, had been genuine. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she said honestly, her voice steady. "But I'm willing to try." Fred nodded, his relief evident. "That's all I can ask for." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the past few weeks easing slightly. Anna gestured toward another painting, a vibrant burst of colors that seemed to dance across the canvas. "Come on, let me show you this one." Fred followed her, his steps lighter than they had been in weeks. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that the bridge between them was not completely burnt, and that maybe, just maybe, they could start rebuilding it. As Anna explained the inspiration behind the painting, her voice calm but sure, Fred listened intently. For the first time, she sensed a glimmer of potential, a notion that perhaps it was worthwhile to pursue second chances. After the exhibition, Fred invited Anna to visit his office. He had spent days debating whether to welcome Anna into his world, which was so different from the simplicity of Millie's diner and the warmth of her gallery. But after the exhibition, with their fragile connection beginning to rebuild, Fred knew it was time for honesty. As Anna stepped into the sleek glass elevator of Horizon Tech's towering headquarters, she felt a pang of nervousness. The pristine marble floors, the polished steel accents, and the soft hum of productivity created an atmosphere that was almost intimidating. Fred stood beside her, his hands tucked into his pockets, his usual confidence softened by the tension in his shoulders. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, revealing a sprawling office that overlooked the city skyline. Anna stepped inside, her eyes widening as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, and the walls lined with awards and accolades. "This is your life," Anna said quietly, her voice tinged with awe and hesitation. Fred nodded, walking to the large window that framed the bustling city below. "This is what I've built. Years of work, late nights, and pressure I could never quite escape. It's everything I thought I wanted." Anna approached slowly, her gaze shifting from the view to Fred's face. "But it's not enough, is it?" He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Not even close." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Fred's admission hanging in the air. Finally, he turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable. "I wanted you to see this, not to impress you, but to show you the other side of me. The part I tried to hide because I was afraid it would change how you saw me." Anna crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "I don't care about this," she said, gesturing to the office around them. "I care about the person you are, Fred. The one who makes mistakes, but tries to fix them. The one who sees me." Fred's chest tightened at her words, and he nodded. "That's all I want. To be that person for you, and to help you become the person you're meant to be." He gestured for her to follow him, leading her to another window on the far side of the office. From this angle, the city stretched out in endless layers of light and movement. Fred pointed to a small building in the distance. "That's Millie's," he said softly, "where it all started." Anna leaned closer, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It feels like a lifetime ago." "For me, it feels like the beginning of something I never knew I needed," Fred replied. He turned to her, his expression earnest. "And I want to give you the same. A beginning, a chance to create the life you've always dreamed of." Anna frowned slightly, uncertain of his meaning. Fred reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, her eyes scanning the contents. A lease agreement. Her name on the document. The address listed was for a bright, airy studio space in the heart of the city. "Fred," she began, her voice catching. "I'm not doing this to repay you or to fix what I broke," Fred said quickly. "I'm doing it because you deserve it. Because your art deserves a home, and your dreams deserve to come true." Anna's vision blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She looked up at Fred, seeing nothing but sincerity in his gaze. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he said softly, "but I wanted to." Anna broke down her walls for the first time in weeks. She stepped forward and hugged Fred tightly, her arms encircling him as she allowed herself to feel the weight of his gesture, his words, and his quiet determination to make things right. Later that evening, Anna stood in the empty studio space Fred had secured for her. The walls were pristine, the sunlight streaming through large windows, casting a golden glow on the polished floors. She walked to the center of the room, her hands brushing against a new easel Fred had arranged to have delivered. She set up her brushes and paints, taking a deep breath as she surveyed the space. It was hers, truly hers. Anna felt a slight relief from the weight of the past few months as she dipped her brush into a vivid blue. Fred had made mistakes, yes, but his actions had given her the tools to build a better future. Her brush glided across the canvas, each stroke bold and deliberate. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope blooming in her chest. This was the start of something new. As Anna stood back to admire the first painting in her new studio, she thought of Fred and the quiet ways he had supported her. She was uncertain about the direction their story would take, but for now, she was prepared to move on. The evening sun painted the walls of Anna's newly opened art studio in hues of gold and amber, the soft light catching the edges of her vibrant canvases. Guests trickled in, their faces lighting up as they stepped into the warm and inviting space. The studio, once just a dream, now stood as a testament to Anna's perseverance and Fred's quiet support. Anna stood near the entrance, her hands nervously smoothing the skirt of her simple yet elegant dress. Around her, laughter and conversation filled the room, mingling with the soft strains of classical music playing in the background. Her paintings lined the walls, each one a bold expression of her journey, filled with raw emotion and hope. This was her moment, yet she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the significance of it all. Her younger brother, Ben, appeared by her side, his face alight with excitement. "This place is amazing, Anna," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "You've really done it." Anna smiled, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "We've done it, Ben. I couldn't have gotten here without you." Ben hesitated, glancing across the room where Fred stood, quietly chatting with a few guests. "And without him," Ben added, his voice softening. Anna followed his gaze, her heart tightening. Fred had been the silent architect behind so much of this success. Despite everything, he'd supported her in ways she could never have anticipated. Ben straightened, his usual boyish grin replaced by something more serious. "I should thank him." Anna watched as her brother made his way across the room, weaving through the crowd, until he stood in front of Fred. Fred turned, his expression softening when he saw Ben. "Mr. Matthews," Ben began, extending a hand, "I wanted to say thank you for the scholarship, for giving me the chance to pursue my dreams." Fred shook his hand firmly, his smile modest. "No need to thank me, Ben. You earned it. I just wanted to make sure you had what you needed to succeed." Ben nodded, his admiration evident. "Well, it means a lot. To me, to Anna. You've done more than you know." Fred's gaze flicked to Anna, who was watching the exchange with quiet emotion. "It's worth it," he said simply. As the evening progressed, the celebration continued with laughter, toasts, and an undercurrent of joy that filled every corner of the studio. Millie, the diner's owner, arrived with a tray of pastries that quickly became the centerpiece of the refreshment table. Friends, family, and supporters mingled, their conversations weaving together stories of Anna's journey and the triumph of her art. Fred spent most of the evening in the background, his usual quiet presence allowing Anna to take center stage. But his eyes rarely left her, watching as she glided through the room, her confidence shining brighter than ever. He had always known she was extraordinary, but seeing her here, surrounded by her creations, celebrated by her loved ones, made him fall even harder. As the crowd began to thin, Fred approached Anna, holding a glass of champagne. "Congratulations," he said softly, his voice warm. "Tonight's all about you." Anna smiled, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "I couldn't have done it without you." Fred shook his head. "You could have, but I'm glad I got to be a part of it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Fred glanced toward the far wall. His gaze lingered on a large painting, a sunrise over a still lake, bursting with vibrant colors. It was the same one he had admired at her exhibition, a piece that seemed to capture both the hope and the struggles of her journey. "I wanted to do something special tonight," Fred said, his voice softening. "Something that reflects how much you mean to me." Anna tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Fred set his glass down and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. His sincere eyes filled the room as he knelt before her. "Anna," he began, his voice steady, despite the emotion behind it. "You've changed my life. You taught me what it means to be vulnerable, to care deeply, and to create something real. I've made mistakes, but every step of this journey has led me here, to you. Will you marry me?" The room fell silent as Anna's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked down at Fred, his expression filled with hope and love. Slowly she nodded, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Yes." The silence broke into applause and cheers as Fred slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into a tight embrace, their connection stronger than ever. Later that evening, after the guests had left, Fred and Anna stood alone in the studio. The lights were dim, the city's glow filtering through the large windows. Fred extended a hand, his smile playful. "Dance with me?" Anna laughed softly, taking his hand. They swayed to the faint strains of music lingering in the air, their movements slow and unhurried. As they danced, Anna's gaze drifted to the plaque Fred had mounted earlier that day. Its inscription caught the light. "Inspire and be inspired." Anna leaned her head against Fred's chest, her heart full. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of her struggles lifting. This was more than a new beginning. It was a life filled with love, dreams, and the promise of endless possibilities. Together, they had found their place, a world built on resilience, hope, and the courage to start again. If this film touches your heart, leave your mark with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.